What happens when India says a US trade pact is very close, right after locking in a major deal with Europe, while Washington is still using tariffs like a pressure weapon? Because that's the moment we're in right now. Indian government sources are signaling very significant progress with the US and that the agreement is near closure, basically in the final stretch. Now here's the big question. Is this deal a breakthrough that boosts India's growth? Or a pressure valve designed to pull India deeper into America's economic orbit? I'm Imran, a Middle East-based analyst. And today we're going to unpack what's actually on the table and what both sides really want. First, why this suddenly matters. India just proved it can close big trade negotiations, and fast, with Europe. That changes leverage. It tells Washington, India has options. And it tells investors, India is positioning itself as a de-risk alternative in the global supply chain. So the US trade track isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening inside a bigger strategic story. Who gets India's market access and on what terms? Now, let's talk about what these US-India talks usually get stuck on. For the US, the recurring asks are pretty clear. Better access for American farm products, clarity on dairy and food standards, market rules around digital trade and data, and long-running disputes around medical devices pricing and market access. For India, the priorities are different. More predictable access for pharmaceuticals and industrial exports, better terms for IT and services, and quietly but critically, mobility for skilled professionals. Because services is where India has real leverage. So this deal is less one big headline and more a basket of trade-offs. Here's what makes the timing explosive. Tariffs. The Trump-style approach treats tariffs not just as economics, but as leverage. And when tariff threats rise, India has two choices: absorb uncertainty and negotiate slowly, or lock in a framework that reduces the risk of sudden tariff shocks. That's why you're seeing near-closure language. It signals momentum and stability. But stability comes with a price: concessions. And this is where people should pay attention. If India opens too fast on sensitive areas like agriculture, it risks domestic backlash. If the US demands constraints on India's digital policy, it could limit how India governs data, platforms, and emerging tech. And if the deal becomes too politically framed as choose America over China, India risks losing strategic flexibility, the ability to trade widely without being forced into one camp. So what's the real strategic logic? From Washington's perspective, India is the big prize in the long China competition. Not because India will copy China, but because India can absorb supply chains, grow manufacturing, and become a massive alternative market. A stable US-India trade framework helps American companies invest in India with fewer surprises. It also gives Washington an argument that it's building an economic coalition, not just military alliances. From India's perspective, the logic is more practical. India wants growth, it wants jobs, it wants investment. And it wants to move up the value chain, from basic manufacturing into electronics, chemicals, pharma, and eventually high-end industrial capacity. A US pact helps with that, if it brings real access and reduces uncertainty. But here's the catch. If the US keeps treating tariffs as a weapon, even against partners, then every deal becomes temporary insurance, not long-term trust. So the real test isn't the press release. The real test is, does this agreement create predictable rules? Or does it just pause the pressure cycle for a few months? Now let's be concrete. What would success look like? Success is not India wins or America wins. Success is clear rules that reduce tariff whiplash, tangible gains for Indian exports and services, and meaningful openings for US firms without destabilizing India's domestic politics. Because if India signs a deal that triggers a backlash at home, it won't last. And if America signs a deal but continues tariff threats, investors won't trust it. So here's my bottom line. Yes, this could be a growth-positive move for India, especially if it locks in better access for exports and services. But it's also a geopolitical gravity play, a way to pull India closer into a US-led economic orbit. And India will try to do what India always does when it's smart. Take the growth, keep the autonomy. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this US-India trade pact becomes a real breakthrough? Or is it just a temporary truce until the next tariff threat? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want calm, fast breakdowns with real incentives, like, subscribe, and share. Let's break it down.